Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Thanks for tuning in today. We are going to take a deep dive into Microsoft Teams governance. Before we get into it, just a couple of housekeeping items. We will be recording the webinar. We will provide an email with a link to the slide deck and the recording later this afternoon. During the webinar, please don't hold back your questions. There's a questions pane in the GoToWebinar panel. Please submit your questions there. We'll hold them till the end. If we don't get to all the questions, maybe we'll do a blog post. And joining me today, I have Ashley Hickman and Arya Parsi, and I think we're ready to get started, guys.
Yep, so next. Great. So hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Hickman, and I am a project manager and business analyst with Witham. I've been working in the technology consulting space for about 5 years now, and my focus has always been on providing user-centric solutions. So really making sure that whatever it is that I'm working on, that it's ultimately going to be adopted and successful and provide value to the organization. So really excited to talk with you today about Teams governance. And a little fun fact here, I really enjoy gardening, so currently have a lot of okra, tomatoes, peppers planted. So hopefully here in the next couple of weeks, I'll have everything I need for a summer salsa.
Thank you,
Arya.
Ashley. And I'm Arya Parsi. I'm a senior program manager with them. I began my career as a developer implementing custom applications in SharePoint. And I pivoted more towards project management the last couple of years. And I mainly engage with our clients to solve their business problems. And a little fun fact about myself, I love to run. So you'll catch me outside running various races around town. So that said, we're going to dive right into things. Okay, so today's topics for our webinar is automated governance, team policies, and external and guest access. And we've also planned out some future webinars around Teams governance. We're going to be having a webinar on August 20th for those that are interested, and it's going to be a demo-driven session of some popular Microsoft Teams applications, including a custom bot that we've developed with them. And also, we're going to have a lot of best practices around just general app governance. So please sign up for that when you get a chance. And then we are also going to have a separate webinar after that covering team organizations and lifecycle, and also guidance around team and channel creations. All right, so quick poll. We have a few questions here in our poll that we're going to let you guys answer.
Okay. It looks like the majority of our audience are already actively using Teams, and then some that are just planning a rollout. So I think everyone is in the right place here for today's session. And some are even still evaluating Teams. So hopefully we provide some valuable info for everyone. Okay. Thank you for participating. And then just one more. Curious to see if anyone's actually using automated governance already. Okay. Ashley, looks like your prediction was on point. It looks like most everybody is not yet. So, and then some are not sure. Okay.
Great.
Thanks.
Perfect webinar to join if you haven't. So let's get into it. Okay. So just, before we start out talking about automated governances, I wanted to just go over some of the standard functionality that's included within Microsoft Teams. And as you can see here, those include chat, team and channels, meeting, voices, apps, bots, and connectors. And one thing to note is that there are additional add-on licenses you can purchase from Microsoft, and those include things such as audio conferencing, toll-free numbers, and also phone systems. So these are the most common automation use cases for Microsoft Teams that we've seen. Specifying a naming convention, specifying an expiration date, creating retention policies, and limiting who in the organization can create a team. And we're going to dive into those. So it's important to know that having a naming convention helps to manage the growth of teams, groups, and SharePoint, because whenever you create a team in the back end, a group gets created, Office 365 group, and also a SharePoint site. So what's supported in that is that you can basically create prefixes or suffixes to define the naming convention of a team. And you can also create block words that are, words you can't use in creation of a team or a group. And that's something that we generally help our clients step through the naming conventions with. So I wanted to step back and ask Ashley her thoughts on naming conventions.
Yeah, absolutely. So naming conventions, I'm a big proponent of them. It's a great way to provide consistency for your users from a findability perspective so that they can very easily know what teams already exist and then also find existing teams that they may have access to. So it's a really great way to provide some of that structure and also governance that very often people may already have established in other kind of areas within Office 365.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.
So another technique for automated governance is creating expiration policies. So Teams pretty much becomes the wild, wild west after a while. You get lots of teams that are created in an organization and they're never used. So if these teams that are not used gets left unchecked, you can create a burden on your tenant or resources, whether it's IT or in the back end. So expiration policies help with that. They basically allow a owner to get a notification to renew a team as the expiration time nears. Teams that are not renewed automatically are basically deleted. And then generally what happens is a notification is sent periodically to the team owner. And that notification is usually every 30 days, 15 days, and then a day prior to the expiration. And what you can do as a team owner is if you want to keep that team that's there, you can just click on a renew now. And what's going to do is it's going to reset the team expiration. And if you don't, it's automatically going to delete it, as I mentioned previously. And when it gets deleted, all the content gets deleted. But just to let you know, the team owner can restore that team if it's accidentally deleted within the 30-day time frame, and so can a team administrator. So personally, I know that I create a lot of test teams for use cases for various clients, and unfortunately, I'm guilty, just like everybody else, of forgetting to go back and delete those teams once I'm done my test cases. So these expiration policies are just a great thing to have. It's going to send out a notification to me that, hey, Arya, you forgot to create this site. Nobody's actively using it, and it's just going to go ahead and delete it for me in case I do forget. And one other thing I want to mention here is that it's generally a best practice to make sure you have more than one team owner associated with a team, because you may come into the case of either somebody being on PTO when the expiration notice gets sent, or maybe that person has left the organization. So you just kind of want to have that backup person whenever you provision a team for that purpose also. And then next topic we have is retention policies. Your organization may already have a retention policy in place for other applications in your Office 365 stack. So what a retention policy does, it basically allows you to keep your data that you need to comply with internal policies, industry regulations, or various legal needs. It also gives your organization the ability to delete data that you no longer need, or you just want to get rid of that data for compliance needs. And just a tidbit of information here at Within, we have decided that any of our one-on-one chats that we have with our colleagues, they're deleted after 30 days within Teams. Now, what we've seen is many organizations, in terms of retention policies, generally decide that, due to compliances, that they may use what we call the 7 or never rule. And that means they either retain the information for 7 years, or they just choose to never delete their information. So that's just something that, you just want to look at from a very high-level organizational perspective and have your stakeholders involved whenever you're defining these governance needs. So, going back to the topic that I just mentioned previously, which is ARIA creating many teams for test purposes within our tenants here at Witham. It's often easy for users to just go crazy and just create lots of teams. So generally, best practice here is to limit who in your organization has the ability to create such teams. This is done by usually placing a restriction on team creation to only be done by members of a particular security group or user base. Now, one thing I do want to mention here is that there are two schools of thoughts around this. Microsoft generally says, okay, everybody should be able to create a team and go crazy because you can just use expiration policies to clean up teams. However, generally what we see here is that most IT departments want a more granular control over who creates a team. This is just, again, somewhere where we just work closely with our clients to define the right choice for them. Okay, so now we've discussed some of these great automated governance features, and you may want to ask yourself, okay, so what's truly needed to enable these features since they were not part of the standard Teams capability that I went over? To answer that, in short, Microsoft wants to, sell licensing. So what we have is you're going to need Azure AD Premium Plan 1, and that provides you the ability to do team naming policies, expiration policies, and security group for team creators. And then Office 365 E3 or above is needed for creating retention policies. Now, Azure AD Premium Plan 1, by the way, is sometimes packaged up with other licensing models. So you just want to make sure you work with a vendor like us at Witham to basically figure out the right licensing model for you. So lastly, while some of these features that we mentioned are great, you may want to just step back and just look at it from a cost perspective from your organization to make sure that, hey, is it something that we can handle some of these tasks internally within our IT department? Some of the things like naming conventions or creating, deleting groups, deleting teams. You may just want to decide that to just do a manual process for those. Ashley, is there anything else you want to mention in terms of licensing?
Yeah, so one thing to keep in mind specifically for when we're looking at these licensing options, as Aria already mentioned, if you have a Microsoft 365 E3 license, actually you already get Azure AD Premium Plan 1. So if you do happen to have that, that's already a benefit and something you could start taking advantage of some of the items we just covered. But more importantly, from a licensing perspective, it's important to think holistically of your organization. So one of the benefits specifically with a P1 plan for Azure AD is to look at the security, the additional security and compliance measures that you do get and controls with those things. So thinking about DLP policies and potentially like sensitivity labels, things like that. There are certainly a lot of benefits that it provides to your organization from security and compliance perspective beyond just Teams governance.
Great, thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.
So next, we're going to cover some team policies here. So just to give you a definition of what team policies are, it basically allows the administrator to control what users in your organization can do within Microsoft Teams. And generally by that, we mean what you can do in a particular team or channel. We generally see companies with over 100 employees that go ahead and create custom policies. These policies sometimes applying just too many policies can become a maintenance nightmare for smaller organizations. That's why, the larger you are, the more it makes sense. And there's no one size fit all option for policies in terms of Microsoft Teams. Every organization is different and needs a way to manage teams based on their specific needs. Some organizations just go ahead and use the default org-wide settings that Teams has, and they apply it to all users in their organizations. And then, as I mentioned, others might split it up by various departments, different working groups. So you can just mix and match how you want to create these custom policies. So this is generally where we spend a lot of time with our clients in their governance sessions to make decisions, is around such policies. And here I have like the top 4 policies that I would say that we consider. There's many more, but generally these are where most of our clients have needs for setting up custom policies. So meeting policies are used to control what features are available to users when they join Microsoft Teams meetings. And then you have messaging policies that are used to control what chat and channel messaging features are available to users in Teams. And then also you have such capabilities like live events policies that are used to turn on or off features, such as who can join a live event, if transcription is provided for attendees, or if recording live events is available for people that are scheduled to hold such live events. And then lastly, we have app permission policies that are used to control what apps you want to make available to team users in your organizations. So next thing we wanted to cover is, how do these team policies work? So you can edit the global policy, as I mentioned, or you can create a custom policy. If you create a custom policy, that policy will be applied to the subset of users that you designate. And if one isn't a part of that particular custom policy, then the global policy is going to be applied to those users as the default. So it's kind of like a little hierarchical. So you got kind of have to be careful to iron all those details out before you apply policies, because then you might have confusion of what users have certain policies and what users don't, and which policies apply to particular users. So it's a really good idea to document that and have everybody understand where those team policies are set. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Ashley to cover external and guest access.
Great, thank you. So we'll start here with external access. And so when it comes to governance, one of the really important components, something for us to always consider when we have those conversations with clients is designating who has access to what. So to start here with external access, one thing I want everyone to be aware of on the call is that it is a feature that is automatically turned on by default within Teams. So if you're at an organization where you do not allow external access, it's something that's not permitted from a regulatory or compliance perspective, it is a setting that you do want to make sure to turn off when rolling out Teams, or if you currently have it rolled out today. External access specifically, though, it allows people in your organization to find, call, chat, and set up meetings with people outside your company. So one thing I do want to highlight here, external access within Teams, that does not mean that those external users have access to the actual Teams itself, nor the channels or any content specifically in the team. So by no means do you think having external access turned on is a doomsday situation. It certainly isn't. If you already have it enabled for Skype, that setting's on, and perhaps you're already familiar with the ability to maybe chat with a vendor, a client, somebody that you might be collaborating with. Very, very similar, just like that. However, if you are a Teams admin, you do have the ability to specify domains specifically for external access. So if they're ones that you would like to include, maybe you have a bunch of subsidiaries and you want to define specifically which domains that your users can interact with, then that's a way to kind of include those people. Also, you can exclude domains. So maybe you have a competitor, for example, and you want to make sure that no one from your organization is interacting with somebody from that particular domain. So something that you certainly want to consider and be aware of when it comes to rolling out and also governing teams. Another trend that we're seeing more and more of, companies are getting rid of physical phones, hardware. This is something that was already happening, but especially given the current environment, we're more and more remote now, and having that flexibility to chat, make calls, also take meetings from anywhere is really important, and it's becoming more important. So Teams is a great way, and via external access is a great way to allow your users to do that. Specifically the Teams app, it works excellent. So if you're not at your desktop, at your home office, you can easily reply to a client, a vendor, anyone that you're maybe collaborating with or has reached out very easily and quickly. So Aria, though, when we're not working together on a Teams engagement, your experience with external access?
Yeah, I think just generally from what I've seen from most of our commercial engagements is that most of our clients do choose to keep external access on. That said, they sometimes tend to restrict what kind of domains are allowed to communicate back and forth within their tenant or allow. But generally, we kind of want to step back and just look at it holistically and make the right decision during a governance workshop with our clients.
Great, thank you. So next we're going to be touching on guest access, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time today kind of going through the difference between external and guest, because it can get a little confusing for people, especially if you're setting up Teams for the first time. So guest access is turned off by default within Microsoft Teams. From a capability standpoint, it differs from external access. So it is by no means the same thing. Guest access, this is where you're inviting a particular guest to a specific team or potentially a private channel if that's a feature that you're using. So when you're inviting a guest into a team and/or channel, that means they have the ability to participate in those threaded discussions. They can see the resources in those teams, meaning any documents, they can co-author, they can collaborate with you. So there's certainly a lot of value in looking at establishing a guest access policy. But before you do that, you do want to consider if you have an existing policy or procedure in place right now for guest access. That's something that we often spend a little bit of time with clients discussing and also defining how that can work in tandem with how the Teams policy can work in tandem with that, or maybe this can help you establish a guest access policy. So something that I do want to, I know some organizations can be hesitant to kind of look at guest access and permit that, allow that. So of course, if there's a regulatory reason, compliance reason, simply leave it turned off. However, I would consider, I would just definitely advise clients to really consider that, simply because if there is a strong use case for anyone within your organization to collaborate with a client, with a vendor, with a customer, anything, any use case to do that, it's really important to provide users a safe way to do that and in a structured way to do that. So when there isn't a guest policy at an organization, very often that's when we find people have, kind of maybe gone and found their own solutions. Sometimes departments go rogue. They purchase solutions that IT has no clue about. They're not governing them, so you have a little shadow IT going on. Also, sometimes you have your savvier users who might just go to their personal email, using Gmail, Google Drive, Box, stuff like that. And as soon as you have solutions that are not being governed appropriately by your organization, they're no longer going to be meeting any sort of any governance, established governance policies you have in place, as well as retention policies, compliance measures, anything like that. It certainly poses a risk to your organization, because at that point you're losing control of your data. So it's certainly something that if there is a heavy use case or even a small use case, it's worth looking at establishing a guest access policy in Teams. It's an excellent platform for collaboration, communication. I know very often people just get caught up in that, back and forth email with people when they're trying to collaborate, and there's a lot of, CCing people, BCCing people, attaching items, and then there's that constant question, am I working on the latest version? And then you've been working on something, you get another email, or, oh, you didn't see this, you weren't on this email. So it really simplifies that process if there is something that you're actively working on beyond, maybe just a couple emails back and forth. If you're collaborating with somebody on a contract, on a project, that's where it makes sense to establish, let's say, a workspace, something like a Microsoft team, where you can have those threaded discussions. You can add people later, they can reference those discussions and can easily collaborate and co-author on documents with them. So it's definitely there's a lot of value in looking at a guest access policy.
Okay.
So Sasha, I don't know if that's all I have to say around guest access. I've seen there's some questions, and we're certainly going to be getting to those in a second here, but that's what I had.
Thank you, guys. Just a quick note before we dive into the questions. We do have a supplement to today's discussion on Teams governance in form of a tip sheet. It's a great resource to learn some of the key considerations. We kind of break it down a little bit more past today's discussion. You can't click that link now, but when we send the link to the recording, you'll be able to download it there. Highly recommend to check it out for some additional advice. And with that, let's take a look at some questions. Some of these popped up earlier in the presentation, so we're going to take it back a little bit. Can you enforce a naming convention? For example, prevent the creation of a team if its name doesn't match.
So can you reread that question, Sasha?
Yes, so can you enforce a naming convention?
Yes, you could enforce a naming convention. The caveat here, again, is that you could do it on the prefix or the suffix. And also you could block words that are used in the naming convention. So if there's a particular word that you don't want, like, I don't know, classified or something strange, that you don't want mentioned in a team.
Like don't have top secret in the title.
Right. Or, maybe you're doing an acquisition or something like that, and you don't want people to be able to decipher the name of the company you're acquiring. So you may want to block that out as or have your IT department block that out as a word so that nobody names a team such a name that could be discoverable by others within your organization when they're looking for various teams.
Okay, thank you. Should you be saving documents in Teams or back those up to a server somewhere?
So for that, yeah, definitely save it in Teams because it is backed up to the cloud. So that's where you kind of get all the benefits of using Teams. It's backed up, and then of course it's accessible without having to VPN in anywhere, and you can access it through your desktop, browser, anywhere, or your mobile device. So all the reasons to just keep everything on Teams and collaborate on files through that. Also, it also gives you the ability to do various co-authoring techniques. So that's why I just keep everything in Teams.
Yeah, and ultimately where you're saving documents within Teams, it's a SharePoint site underneath ultimately. So there really isn't a need. There's no reason to not save documents in Teams. There's a lot of capabilities from a retention perspective and such where you should have essentially all the capabilities you need by saving the documents there.
That's good. This one we may want to expand on and see what others in our practice think, but can you please give us examples of some names of teams that a sample CPA firm might set up for setting up and using Teams? We can think of that on the fly. Or
CPA. So this is where it's a little tricky because Witham is a predominantly CPA firm, but ourselves, Ari and myself, we're in the Witham digital practice. So we're not accountants, we're not CPAs. In terms of the way that Witham, so we actually, this is a really good kind of example of governance, is we do not see the teams that the accountants have set up. So in terms of even within our own firm, we don't have access to that. We don't see that information. I do know that whenever we were kind of piloting Teams within Witham, I mean, our group, we've been using it for essentially as long as it's been around, but when Witham as a whole, especially the accountants started using that, I know depending for a CPA firm, is it tax, is it audit? If it's audit, if it's a large audit, then maybe having that geared around a specific client is a good way to do that. So it really just depends on specifically the service, I would say. And yeah, I mean, if it's it could be based around client. That's just an example. Like specifically, if an audit you do every year, you know that way you have a good place to reference past audits, resources, and also conversations. So if there's anything like any gotchas you need to watch out for every year, you have that historical information you can reference back to.
Right,
Yeah,
and that's
we'll,
going
go ahead.
back to that question. You know, if you do it by clients, create teams by clients. If you're a CPA firm and you're doing audits, you might want to create a channel for your particular year that you're doing audit, or if you're doing taxes, you know, a particular year for as a channel. So that way you keep everything kind of organized in that respect.
And just to follow up to that, and I think we might, this could be actually a good follow-up blog, because I'm sure this is a common question. If they have about 1,000 clients, would they set up for each one? Is that easy to do? Is there, is that hard to do?
So, you know, I think the question can be answered in multiple ways. It's definitely easy to do. You could either do it manually, or we can script that out for you. If you have like a list of clients that you're starting out with, and you know you have your 1,000 clients already, we could definitely script it out where we provision the teams for you based on the particular clients you already have.
Okay. Let's see, we have a ton of questions, but we're good on time here. Are there security solutions to avoid data leaks for someone to save documents to a team and download when they're home on a personal computer?
Yeah, I think that's where Ashley was mentioning the you know, security requirements around licensing. So within Microsoft Stack, you have all this DLP policies and conditional access policies that you could set to prevent data leaks, like, you know, social security numbers, you know, credit card numbers as an example. Those are like the most common use cases that we see, where it won't even let you save that information or send it out in emails for, you know, that's outside of Teams, obviously, but they're all kind of within the whole Azure stack. So when you set these policies, it'll cover Teams, Exchange, all the good stuff that's covered under the Microsoft stack.
Yeah. So I will say though, to a follow-up point to Aria, that's all specific to your use case. So for example, do you want to block all documents from being downloaded? Is it just certain types of documents? And even then, kind of like why? You know, like there's a lot more, I feel like, of a conversation to have there. There's a lot of capabilities to what Aria was saying. With leveraging premium plans of Azure AD, there's a lot of capabilities around DLP, even like sensitivity labels, all of that, where when you're classifying that document, you can even look at like auto classification and then the protection measures that are applied to those specific labels. It's a deep conversation to have, and all of it's going to be specific to an organization and their requirements, but there are a lot of capabilities and certainly something that can be applied to content within Teams.
Right, and also just to add on, I had mentioned the conditional access policies, and that allows you to basically lock down how documents are accessed or what applications are accessed using what kind of device, whether it's a managed device within your organization, or if it's accessed even like, you know, in a different country or a different domain. So you might want to get very granular in terms of that. So that these are things that we can definitely guide you down, but you know, yes, it's possible, but it just needs to have a much deeper conversation about exactly what you're trying to accomplish and if it makes sense, because you don't want to really lock down something and not, you know, you may accidentally lock down something, you know, based on the conditional policies, and then it's not, people can't collaborate on that document. So
yeah, there's a lot to consider, a lot of options, and that's kind of the great thing with it's a good and a bad. It's a blessing and a curse with Microsoft. You have a lot of options, but that's why having some conversations and really like teasing out your requirements, your needs, and then configuring everything appropriately. Also, pilot phases are key. Definitely something you'd want to look at doing as well. But sorry, I don't want to spend too much time on this question when we have a few others, Sasha.
Yes. I think that was good. Let's see. This one's interesting. We'll see if we have some advice. We use a security group for Teams creation. However, it seems to control group creation. We have a large number of Power BI users which need that access to create workspaces. and so they can create teams as well, which we don't want. Any advice?
So, the group creation security measure is definitely to restrict who can create teams, or more specifically, give access to those that are only allowed to create teams. So if you need those Power BI users to be able to provision teams on the fly, then they're going to have to be a part of that particular group as well. I think that's the short of the answer.
Okay. I'm going to combine a couple of questions. The answer is, the question was, does Teams lessen the amount of emails? Yes, but I'd like to address that. Does it really lessen the amount of emails? And then if somebody misses a mention in Teams, does that get alerted to your email? Are there certain settings that you have to set if somebody's not receiving that, perhaps?
Yeah, Ashley, do you want to handle this, or do you want me to answer this?
So we can handle it a little bit in tandem. I would definitely say it cuts down on the amount of emails specifically for collaboration. So, and this can go for internal collaboration, external collaboration. So it depends who you're working with, but ultimately it has the ability to significantly cut down on the amount of emails, also the amount of things that you're missing. So I know there was a question even about missing mentions within Teams. And so overall, it's cutting down on the amount of emails. You can have email notifications sent to your email from the notifications that you're getting in Teams. So that's something that you can see. So you're kind of getting like a double dose there, and people can also tailor the notifications that they do get. So ultimately, it does cut down on that. Also, you can look very easily at your, you can reference back to your notifications. I know that's something that I do because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Or maybe like Sasha, for example, tagged me in something 2 days ago. Did I look at it 2 days ago? So I go back to just like looking at my notifications and scroll back and go there. But also I'll see all the other notifications. So if there's something I miss, it's a very quick way to reference it. But Aria, is there anything you want to add to that? I'm trying to make sure I answered every part of the question.
Yeah, I think one thing that would freak me out is if one of my Within colleagues sends me an email. I would be like, why would you be sending me an email? We have Teams.
Don't send
So
me an email.
generally, most of our communication back and forth happens within Teams, and of course, like I mentioned, storing files and then collaborating on documents all happens within Teams.
Mhm.
The only time that if you're gonna do something that's not within Teams, we might even like send a attachment, but what we do is we actually just link a document instead of even sending an attachment, because attachments, one of the things that happens is it may get blocked by spam filters, and also there's those it just clogs up your inbox with data, so we don't even send attachments within emails. We just send a link. Yes.
Yeah, one thing I will say about the benefit of sending a link is, say you send something and then you make a change 5 minutes later, the link is still valid. They're going to see the updated version of it. So that's definitely preferred as well.
Going back to that, it cuts down on, we used to see emails get sent back and forth with attachments, and then you have like version 1 of the attachment, version 1.1, and like 20 versions, all because somebody changed one word in a document. So this just cuts down on all of that. And going back to the notification question, again, these are all just various settings you could set, whether you get a notification in Teams or whether you get a notification in your email if it's a missed notification. So these are all just things you can set and configure. And then one other thing I do want to mention, notifications sometimes may get annoying. And when I say that, I love Teams, but I have a lot of colleagues that may work, past the hours that I usually work, or they're working on weekends and they might tag you. And I use the Teams mobile client a lot. So on the Teams mobile client, you could go in and set silent hours. So I do that all the time, where I have it set so after like 6 p.m. and on the weekends, notifications don't get sent to my phone, because it's like ding, 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 and I just don't want to deal with work after certain hours because I got family obligations. So I think it's useful to set those.
Good. I think we have time for one more, and then we can give folks 20 minutes back, 15 minutes. Can you set can you apply retention rules to a Teams channel?
Yes. Yes. So I don't know, Ari, if you want to talk about this or you want me to talk about this. Okay.
Yeah.
So retention, this is a little tricky. And if you are setting up retention policies within Teams, I would, one, it has to be separate. I would do a little bit of research. Microsoft obviously is, they have great documentation out there. Also, they're constantly changing it. So it's always good to just reference whatever the latest and greatest is from Microsoft. But retention policies within Teams, sorry, what was the retention rules to Teams channels? Is that what was that?
Mhm.
Yes. So this is where there's like two different retention policies that you set up for Teams, because with Teams, you have like the documents that you're storing, and then there's actually like the threaded conversations and then the chat itself. So yes, simple answer, yes. You can set up retention policies. Longer answer, do your research, because you have to set up two separate retention policies. It's like the Teams retention policy is not automatically included in your global retention policy. So just be specific, like on your specific use case, whatever it is specifically you want to make sure is retained, whether in terms of channels, are you looking to retain the conversation in the channel? Are you looking to retain the documents in that channel? Whatever it might be, I would just say double check on what they're doing, but you do have to set up two separate policies. Again, it's always changing, but specifically based on what you want to do, it's possible, but you might have to do a couple extra things in order to do it.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, last one. Hopefully you have insight on this. I was using the /team/URL path for Teams versus SharePoint Online sites, but it seems like Microsoft changed them all to /sites now. Do we know if that's the case? Are you guys familiar with that?
So as far as I know, it's always been /sites, because what happens in Microsoft Teams, whenever you create a brand new team, Office 365 group gets created, and then back end, a Exchange mailbox associated with that, and also a SharePoint site collection is provisioned. So it's as far as I know, it's always been /sites. Now it might have been a long time ago where it was /teams, but my memories doesn't go that far back. So.
I think that just about does it with all the questions. Thank you everyone for joining us. And as we mentioned, we'll share the recording and slide deck this afternoon. I also posted the registration link to our next session, as Ari mentioned, on August 20th. We'll take a deep dive into apps, right guys? And then talk about app governance. So we'd love to have you join us then. And until next time, thank you everyone.
Yeah, thank you all so much.